and the U.S. Senate will help in that regard as well. Here with reaction, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, good to see you. I really mean it when I say this. I mean, only Trump could move at this speed. You can be in Alaska with Putin on Friday and have every Western European leader that matters and NATO leader that matters in the White House today, and he'd be talking about setting up dates for meetings, future meetings. So, we've got to tip our hat to the president.
Oh, so he's flying back from Alaska. Now, you were there, right? That's not an easy trip to go to Alaska, be on the ground for 6 or 8 hours and come back. On his way back, he called me and said, "Do you want to play golf at 11 o'clock tomorrow?" And I said, "No, I'm too tired just watching you, much less being you." So he's a force of nature. Mr. President, if you're watching tonight, I'm very proud of you. Blessed are the peacemakers, and you are a peacemaker to be blessed. Now, we can talk all night about what happened today, but here's the most important thing to me. Today, Zelensky and Putin have agreed to meet. That would not have happened without President Trump. And you can never end this war unless those two people meet. And he's also pledged to have a second meeting where he will be with Zelensky and Putin. But the idea that Zelensky and Putin are going to meet for the first time since this war started, it gives me some hope we can end it. I just talked to the Finnish president, and you need to have him on his show. He's a good guy. He said it went very, very well today. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But how did this war start? A weak president of the United States. How does this war end? A strong president of the United States.
Okay, only one thing the president put out there that I probably have disagreement with, and it's significant, and that is he said it's to be determined, the location, that Putin and Zelensky will meet, and after that meeting takes place, we'll have a trilateral meeting, which would be the two presidents and myself. Why do I not like the idea of Zelensky and Putin alone in the room without the moderating voice of Donald Trump? I would prefer, not that anyone ever listens to me, I would prefer that he be there throughout the whole process.
I know exactly what you're saying, but let's just understand this. You can't end a war without talking. President Trump has gotten people talking. Why did Putin come to Alaska? Because he was rattled by the 50% tariff on India, his second largest customer. So strength gets you a dialogue. Weakness gets you a war. When we pulled out of Afghanistan by Biden, that was a clear sign to Putin he could take Ukraine by force. A weak president leads to aggression. Now, why did he go to Alaska? Because Trump is strong. But if these two people can't sit in a room without killing each other, we're not going to end the war. So look at it this way, Sean. Trump is a peacemaker, but you got to have willing partners. You can only expect so much from a single man, even though he's the president of the United States. So let's see if they can get in a room, not kill each other, and come out willing to talk again. And Trump has set that up, put that in motion. And the way this war ends is when Russia and Ukraine decide to end it.
I think the hostility, the resentment, the anger between both sides is that great. That would be like putting you and Chuck Schumer in a room and expecting a peace deal. I'm not expecting that would be possible. That would be my own. I would prefer, my humble opinion, I think you would increase the odds of success dramatically if President Trump was in the room from the beginning, and probably the second meeting as well. Let me ask you about where this ultimately is headed. Not where Sean Hannity wants it to head. I would rather not reward aggression on the part of Putin. My thoughts on him have never changed. He's a murdering dictator thug, and I don't like how Zelensky's handled everything either, although I think the people of Ukraine have fought valiantly, and I don't think most people would have bet that at this point in this conflict that they would have done as well as they've been doing. And all credit to the Ukrainian people. They're fighting with valor. But it seems to be coming down to a land swap versus security guarantees for Zelensky. How does that play out in your view? Again, not what I want, not what probably what you want, but what is going to be the reality.
Right. Well, here's the reality. Ukraine cannot evict every Russian soldier that occupies Ukrainian territory. They fought like tigers. They kept Russian advances to the minimum. Zelensky has been a good wartime leader, but the credit does go to the Ukrainian people through their military who are outgunned and outmanned. And the only reason they're able to stay in this fight because of American weapons. People forget that it was Trump who gave javelins to the Ukrainian military before he left office, and that allowed them to stop Russia from taking Kyiv. And these weapons being provided by the United States gives a qualitative edge to Ukraine to stay in the fight. How does this end? There's going to be compromise. Ukraine's going to have to recognize that there will be parts of Ukraine under Russian control. That doesn't mean transferring title to Russia, but East Germany and West Germany existed for a long time until reunification. There can be no end of this war without security guarantees. I've got one goal here, to make sure there's no third invasion. If America would tell the world, Russia and Ukraine, we have Europe's back if there's another fight in Ukraine, that you would be picking a fight with the United States if there was a third invasion. There will never be a third invasion. And Donald Trump is setting that in motion. As to land swaps, remember China's watching. Don't do anything in Ukraine that would entice China to take Taiwan.
Well, I think that about sums it up. Maybe we'll put you in the room as well. Senator Lindsey Graham, we appreciate it. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.